War. It's a grim reality that feels both distant and alarmingly close. For many of us in the West, it's the type of nightmare we hope to never encounter. But for one band, a journey to the war-torn Congo found them thrust into a hellish scape of bullets and mortar fire, their fate hanging on the competence and bravery of a single United Nations worker. This harrowing experience nearly cut their promising music career short just as it was starting to take off. This is the story of how Sum 41 survived the Congo. Let's rewind to 2001. Sum 41, composed of lead singer Deryck Whibley, guitarist Dave Brownsound, bassist John McCaslin aka Cone, and drummer Steve-O, are breaking out of their Canadian suburb with their explosive and rebellious debut album, All Killer No Filler. The album featured multiple chart-topping singles such as Fat Lip and In Too Deep, which quickly became pop-punk classics and helped shoot the group into international stardom. Shortly after All Killer No Filler's release in May of 2001, the band were awarded a spot on the Vans Warped Tour, as well as their own international headline tour across multiple countries in Europe and America. With such an impactful debut, the pressure was on for the band to deliver with their second album, and avoid falling into the dreaded sophomore slump. Fortunately, the album, titled Does This Look Infected, was a hit. It dialed up the group's metal influences and contained darker themes, spawning more successful singles like The Hell Song and Still Waiting. It was becoming clear that Sum 41 were more than just a band on the rise, and they had begun solidifying themselves as a driving force in the 2000s pop-punk scene. Amidst their continued rise, they decided to team up with Canadian charity War Child, who offered the band a chance to help raise awareness and provide resources for children in war-torn areas of the world.
We've been talking to War Child, and we decided that we wanted to do something more hands-on than just a concert. We wanted to actually go somewhere and do something.
This culminated in a journey to cross the Atlantic. It witnessed the harsh realities of war firsthand. Their destination?
Deep regrets, but no clear apology for the deadly plunder of this land's resources. The limbs and lives of millions of Congolese were brutally lost for the insatiable demands of King Leopold II, who governed this territory as his personal property.
This historian spent many years trying to identify the exact location of the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, Congo's first prime minister, on the 17th of January 1961.
For 32 years, he ruled with an iron fist and, according to some estimates, amassed as much as $5 billion in personal wealth while in office.
Both Amnesty International and the United Nations have accused the Kabila regime and its troops of murdering civilians, mostly people that belong to the ethnic Tutsi group.
Since his seizure by King Leopold II of Belgium in the late 1800s, the region of the Congo has endured decades of exploitation and suffering. Upon his initial seizure of the colony, King Leopold vowed to bring civilization to his people, but instead, they were enslaved, forced into harvesting resources such as rubber and ivory. His brutal rule would leave an estimated half of the country wiped out. Although international condemnation of his actions by Europe would bring an end to his rule in 1908, the Congo would continue to be exploited by Belgium. Belgium limited the colony's political rights and allowed European and American investors to drain the colony of its natural resources like coffee, cacao, cotton, gold, copper, and uranium, with the Congo being a primary supplier of uranium to the United States in World War II. While infrastructure improved slightly under Belgium's rule, the Congolese people craved independence. This desire resulted in various widespread riots, eventually leading to the country's independence on June 30th, 1960. Sadly, this newfound freedom was short-lived, and heavy political unrest thrust the country into a 5-year conflict known as the Congo Crisis. During this crisis, the country's first elected Prime Minister, Patrice Lumumba, was overthrown and executed, with the overthrowing of President Joseph Kasavubu by one of his own military officers following shortly after. This military officer was Mobutu Sese Seko. Mobutu installed himself as an authoritarian leader, using various methods such as public execution, bribery, and declaring that his political party, the Popular Movement of the Revolution, would be the only legally recognized party, outlawing any others. For the next 30 years, Mobutu would bring suffering to the people of the Congo, which he renamed Zaire shortly after his rule began. Funds gained by the country by foreign aid or exports went directly into Mobutu's pockets, and were used to fund his lavish lifestyle with private jets, palaces, and designer clothing, as well as to bribe politicians and strengthen the country's military. Meanwhile, things like infrastructure, healthcare, and schooling were ignored, sending the country into an estimated $5 to $13 billion of debt throughout his rule. Decades of this corruption would eventually catch up to Mobutu, as in 1996, a rebel group in the east of the country named the AFDL, backed by neighboring Rwanda and Ugandan forces, launched a military campaign against Mobutu and his government. With little sympathy for the dictator after his vicious rule, many citizens of Zaire, as well as Mobutu's own military, would turn against him, resulting in his fleeing of the country less than a year after the campaign began. The leader of the AFDL, Laurent Désiré Kabila, established himself as the new president of the country and changed his name to the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Much like the leaders before him, Kabila's rule will be overshadowed by corruption and even more political unrest throughout the country, culminating in the start of the Second Congo War less than a year after the previous one's conclusion. The conflict included numerous African nations such as Rwanda, Uganda, Burundi, and Zimbabwe, and an estimated 5.4 million people were killed across the war's 5-year span, the most in a conflict since World War II. It also led to Kabila's assassination in 2001, likely by some of the same rebel groups who surged his path to power just years before. His son, Joseph Kabila, took his place as president. Although Joseph was known to embezzle money like his father, he played a pivotal role in peace negotiations that ended the Second Congo War in 2003. With the conflict over, a governmental transitional period was agreed upon to help rebuild and bring peace to the country. It was during this transitional period that Sum 41 embarked on their courageous journey to this war-torn land, leaving the comfort of their lives behind to witness firsthand the harsh realities of the Congo.
It's such a brutal, devastating story. It's like the worst war in African history.
We initially went to the Congo to get a better understanding of what's going on around the world.
We were just a little nervous just because we were unsure of what it was going to be like.
Flying, I was amazed how nice the scenery was. I wasn't really sure, like, is this place going to be as terrible as everyone says it is?
And it had been kind of peaceful. But then the night of the 6th day, something happened that changed all of that.
It just happened so fast, and we didn't really know what to expect. I was just thinking of everything we've done as a band and just everything I've done as a person. I'm just like, well, this is it. This is how it ends.
In late May of 2004, Sum 41 embarked on their life-changing journey to the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Their first few days in the country went smoothly. They met with United Nations spokesman Sébastien Lapierre, who educated them on the tumultuous history of the DRC, as well as its ongoing conflicts. They also spent time enjoying the country's beautiful wildlife, venturing deep into the jungle to observe critically endangered silverback gorillas. Most importantly, though, they highlighted and documented the struggle of children, who are often forced to work in mines, deploy as child soldiers, or simply starve to death in small villages. Young girls often suffer more than the boys, facing assault and accusations of witchcraft. After spending time in an orphanage with some of these girls, the band headed back to Bukavu to unwind. Suddenly, their evening took a terrifying turn.
We're in Bukavu for about 6 days, and it had been kind of peaceful. But then the night of the 6th day, something happened that changed all of that. In a few short hours, the town descended into complete chaos.
Initially, they hoped that it was a one-off incident, perhaps an argument, or gunshots in the air for a celebration. But as the shots continued creeping closer and closer, it became clear that they were in the middle of a serious conflict.
That was really close, man. It's getting really close now.
We're all kind of looking at each other, and I'm thinking to myself, holy I'm in some kind of pickle here.
Seeking guidance from UN officials only left the band more confused, with some suggesting a possible rebel attack, while others dismissed it as simply soldiers firing into the air.
Now, as I understand it, what happened was there are a couple that rallied for Congolese Democracy, the RCD, which is the rebel group that controlled this area throughout the Civil War. So the military commander here, who's a government guy, he sealed the border so they could not get back in. So the shooting started between these two groups.
At this stage, what we determined that it was just individual soldiers who fired off shots into the air. There are no two groupings fighting at this stage.
As anxiety mounted, the band knew they had to get out of the situation sooner rather than later. Their prayers would be answered by UN peacekeeper and former member of the Canadian militia, Chuck Pelletier.
There happened to be a UN peacekeeper there, Chuck.
He was calm all day. You know, he'd been in the Canadian military, and he just was cool as a cucumber the whole time.
Chuck quickly took control of the situation and began setting up evacuation plans. After hours of nerve-wracking waiting, 2 military vehicles alongside armored tanks arrived in front of the compound to evacuate everyone. Finally, they could feel a sense of relief, knowing that in just a few moments, they'd be headed to safety. Unfortunately, this moment of quick solace was shattered by the sound of mortar fire, shaking the hotel.
It'd been about a half hour of just silence, and it felt like, oh, okay, good, maybe it's over. And people were, going out of the rooms and sitting outside and just talking, and we were feeling pretty good. By that point, we were making jokes, and then out of nowhere, this huge mortar just went off.
So we'll be in touch. It hit so close that dust started falling off the ceiling.
As they stood in a shell shock, Chuck rushed into the room and ordered everyone into groups of 10. The plan? Run through the gunfire to the awaiting armored vehicles. This was one of the riskiest things that the band had ever had to do, and there was no room for mistakes. As they sat in the lobby of the hotel, filled with nerves and adrenaline, awaiting the moment, it came. Their group was called.
Group number 1, get ready! Go! Go, 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 go!
Just like that, they found themselves in the safety of an armored vehicle, en route to a United Nations compound nearby. Their arrival at the compound gave the group a sense of relief, knowing that their nightmare was finally over. The band left the country, forever changed by the events that happened in the Congo. After waiting a few days at the compound to ensure safe travel arrangements, some 41 were transported by bus to the airport, where they were safely flown back home. Witnessing the dire situation in Bukavu and experiencing the harsh realities faced by those in the Congo and other impoverished regions of the world helped to profoundly humble the band. Their story was a harsh reality of life's unpredictability and awakened them to privileges that they had once taken for granted. Following their return to America, they released their third studio album, Chuck, named after the UN peacekeeper who saved their lives. The album resonated with fans and has become a fan favorite, charting all the way up to number 10 on the Billboard Albums chart, their highest charting album at that time. As for the DRC, the country experienced a historic moment in 2018 when Felix Tshisekedi was sworn in as president, the first peaceful transition of power in the country's history. Tshisekedi promised to tackle long-term issues plaguing the country, including building infrastructure like roads, bridges, and hospitals, weeding corruption out of the government, and increasing government spending to help fight poverty. Unfortunately, none of these things have materialized yet. Much of the country is still underdeveloped, lacking electricity and clean water. Corruption is still running rampant within the government, and the average Congolese citizen still lives on an average of less than $2 a day. These factors, combined with the rampant spread of diseases such as Ebola and measles, and persistent rebel violence in eastern territories, have continued sending the country into a negative spiral of poverty and violence, with little hope of seeing the other side anytime soon.